make your dreams come true. You need unique solutions for your business, tailor-made to fit you. Come on over to HTA Enterprises, where all your needs are met. Podcast, publishing, marketing and promotion. HTA Enterprises. Basic Blaque, After Dark, the all-new podcast show with your host, Blaque Diamond.
Hello. This is Blaque Diamond. I'm your perfectly imperfect parent coach, and I'm the host of Basic Blaque After Dark. Now, what we do here at Basic Blaque, we talk openly and we talk candidly. And many of our topics are on parenting styles, and community things that's going on, positive things, and cultural customs. But there are some sensitive topics that we do discuss. But tonight, it's personal. I'm going to go a little personal. But before I go personal, I want to ask you a question. How many of you believe that your childhood affects your adulthood? Now, the neighborhood that I grew up in, I want to just take you on a journey a little bit. The neighborhood that I grew up in, it was one of those special neighborhoods where everybody wanted to be a child in that neighborhood, growing up and running and playing. I remember playing dodgeball with my brothers and people in the community. I remember Mr. Softy coming around. I know everybody remembers Mr. Softy. I believe he was in every neighborhood where he had those banana splits, cartwheels. They had the double ice cream cones with sprinkles. We also had this store that was in our community that they made the best heroes and hamburgers. But we also played double dutch with our neighbors. We played freeze tag. We played red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. That was the type of neighborhood that we grew up in. It was a family-oriented neighborhood where everybody knew each other. When we say that the kids of today are missing out on a spectacular childhood, that's the childhood that I had, where we knew everybody, where you can leave your door open and go to the store and come back and everything would still be in there. Where the people in the community, we went to the same elementary schools. We went to the same junior high schools. When we got on the bus and got off the bus, we felt safe. We felt secured. We just knew each other. And that was just what we did in that community. Also in my community, we had this special rock. Now, I know everybody's saying, what's so special about the rock in your community? We got rocks in our community too. But this rock was so special that it set alone. And it was a special color. And it meant a lot of power to it. And that rock was red, black, and green. So if you're from Queens, New York, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know exactly where I'm coming from. You know the neighborhood. That was one of the better neighborhoods. We did everything. Ran to the park, played on the swings, jumped in the pool, watched the guys play basketball, handball court. Now, I wasn't that good at handball, but I tried. We knew everything. We knew everything that was going on in the community. We knew everybody's mother, father, brother, sisters, and cousins. That's where you grew up. That's where you grew up. That's where I grew up. I think I grew up a little faster than what I expected. Now, when I told you earlier that it's going to be personal, it is going to be personal. And some of these topics here and what I'm going to be saying is a little sensitive. Well, to some. I don't want to get into the Me Too. I understand the movement, so I don't want to go and touch too much on that. But what I will say is me also. I didn't come out to tell my family members about me also until I was in my 40s. And I know some people will say, why did you wait so long? I blinked out a lot. I blinked out a lot of things in my childhood. The things that didn't make me so happy, the things that didn't make me so comfortable. As you heard earlier, all the fun things that I did. But those things was outside of the home. Now, I'm not saying I didn't come from a good home, but there was something that went on in my home that nobody knew about. That when I told my family, they were shocked. I don't want to say the R word. What I will say is that I was tampered with in a way that I should not have been. And I spoke to many of you and I said that I'm past that I've forgiven the individual. The individual is no longer with us. I'm not sure how I would have felt if this person was still alive. I don't know if I ever would have said anything because as a child I was fearful. I thought that it was going to hurt my mom because that's what I was told. So I didn't say anything. I just kept it quiet. And I know I should have because I had nieces and nephews. But when you're a child and you're looking at an adult who was a father figure, who was related to you, you're not thinking that they would do anything like that. You're not thinking that you would be hurt, that you would be a victim. You just wouldn't think that that would happen to you. But it did. And it did shape my childhood. It changed some things for me. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later when I say that it shaped my childhood. There were other things that happened in between that and now. And I want to take you on that journey. I'm going to take you back. Well, no, I'm going to go a little forward. Then I'm going to come back. So I just want you to keep up with me, okay? I do what I do because of what happened in my childhood. I am the parent of 12 children. No, they're not all mine. I parented 12, 3 are my biological, and 9 are my nieces and nephews. And I started that journey when I was 17 years of age. I know some people are asking me, how did you get custody of a child and you're a child yourself? Well, I went to court and I had everything that I needed when I went into court. All the paperwork, I had all the documents signed. I had a job at the time. It wasn't a fancy job, but I was able to show receipts. And I know that's what they say nowadays, receipts. But I was able to show that I was able to take care of my relative and myself. But one of the things that I was fearful of when I got into court was them finding out that I was only 17. But they never asked. I know I was sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth? And I did. I swore. But they never asked me. And I know some people may say that was by omission. But then the subject never came up. So I was able to gain custody of my relative. And I was able to provide for her, at least the best way that I can. At that time, I just was focused on raising her and hopefully going to college. My dream was to go to Howard University to be an international judge, but life happened and it shifted some gears. But I was okay with that. But then I inherited my 2 nephews. And again, life happened. Things changed a little bit. It was a little harder for me. 3 children, high school diploma, half-beaten job, braiding hair on the side, just trying to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. And I wanted out. I wanted to find the best way that I could to get out. I didn't want to do some of the things that could have gotten me more money, But that wouldn't have been the answer. It would have just brought me more problems. I didn't want to sell drugs. I didn't want to sell my body. I only had a high school diploma, so what was I going to do? So I had a plan. And I think that I failed. And I'm going to be honest, and I can say that now because I'm older. I think at that time, looking back, that I fell into a deep depression because I couldn't get a job, couldn't get into college. I was raising three kids. Welfare wasn't going to work for me. They were sending me to these jobs and they weren't paying enough. And I really wanted to do what was right for these kids because I stood in court and said that I would take care of them. But I remember this one night, I sat in my bedroom alone and I just started thinking, what could I do that would help them and not make me feel like this anymore? So I had a plan. But then a knock came on my door. So I said, let me put this plan on the side for a minute. And it was my nephew. He had told me that my mother wanted me to come in and watch this show with her. So I said, you know what? This is going to be the last night that I spend with her. So I might as well go in there with her. So I went and I sat at the edge of the bed and I sat there and I was kind of surprised that she wanted me to watch a show, Motown 25. I was like, oh, I was watching Motown, but I guess she was listening to some of the music, which some of it was probably back in her time as well. And I sat there and I just looked at it. I had a blank look on my face. I was wondering, why am I sitting in here? I have a plan and, you know, all this will be over by the morning. I just can't. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Some people may say, oh, you punked out. Some people may say, how hard is it to raise three kids? You got to remember that I was still a kid myself, raising three kids. And I wasn't equipped for that. I wasn't raised to raise other children that weren't mine at that age. So I sat there at the foot of the bed just in tears, just crying because I knew what I had planned and I knew what I was going to do. And I won't tell you what my plan was, but what I will tell you is that there was somebody that came on the screen and they just started singing. And I'm still sitting there with this blank look on my face, not hearing, but hearing, if you understand what I mean. I wasn't hearing anything. There was no sound, no other sound. There was no cars in the street. There was no kids crying. The only thing I heard was a message. And it was the voice of this person, but it was a message. And I started to get it. And I started crying more. And I was just sitting there crying and crying and crying and just listening to this message. And as this person sang, I took every word that they said as if I was writing down what they were saying. I said, she's talking to me. She's talking to me. She's saying, you'll never walk alone. And when I say that, my eyes just opened up and I just continued to cry. And I said, if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to meet this woman and just tell her thank you. Because life happened for me. Life happened right there in that moment for me. For somebody else who didn't know me, who wasn't really talking to me, but I felt like she was, telling me that I'll never walk alone. And I said, you know what? He was here with me all along. Maybe that knock on the door was to wake me up and to bring me in here, to hear somebody else tell me that I won't be by myself, that I'm not by myself. I couldn't turn around and face my mother. I didn't want her to see me crying. So I walked out, and when the side moves, just walking out and whatnot, and trying to sniff up the tears and the stuff that was coming out of my nose, and getting in the bathroom and cleaning myself up and looking at my face and just saying to myself, she said it, I will never walk alone. I won't walk alone. He got me. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And I just kept saying that to myself. I said, but I kept the promise to myself that I'm going to meet this person. And I did. I did meet this person, and she saved my life, to tell you the truth. She actually saved my life that night, because it had not been for her message to me, and I believe it was a message from him to her. Now, I know some people If you figured it out who I was talking about, that's great. Some people say she's a little loud, but I needed that loudness that night. I needed to hear that. I think that was what, almost 40 years ago. I could have been going. But I got it together. I went to college. I got married. I had children of my own. Now, again, I said I never wanted children, but I had children of my own. And I started moving on with my life. I said, wow, life is good. I'm married. I have these children I'm taking care of. I'm going to go back to school. I already had my associate's degree. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree. I'm going to be good. But then life happened again. I don't know what was going on in my home, but I know that I was outside, coming in like we usually do, knocking on the door, banging on the door, like somebody's always home here. Why aren't they getting the door? Well, I turned around to turn to my husband and say to him, do you have the key? And before you know it, somebody snatched me inside, grabbed me and told me to sit down. I sat down, I was shaking. When I say I was shaking, I was shaking. But nothing compared to the way that I felt when I turned and looked at my son was laying on the floor with a gun to his head. My daughter was sitting on the side. My youngest son was sitting on the side right next to him. They had these looks of terror in their face. And after I looked at them laying there, I looked up and my mom was sitting in the chair. My nephew was standing by the window. I had no idea what was going on, who these men were, what they wanted, why they were in my home. They just told me to be quiet. And I'm looking, trying to peer and peep over a little bit because I knew my husband was still out there. I don't know if he saw what happened, but next minute, you know, they grabbed him, threw him against the wall, and made him come inside. And we sat. Then they took me into the back room, and they talked to me. And they told me that if the person in the front room didn't tell them what they wanted, they was going to take my kids. There was no way that I was letting them walk out of that house with my kids. I don't know what piece they had on them, but they would have had to use it that night because they wasn't going to walk out of there with my kids. So I asked them, could I go in the room to see the person? And they told me no. I knew who it was, but I wanted to see them anyway. To ask them, what was he thinking? What was going on? I needed to know. At the same time, we still had a cab outside that had our grocery in the car. So I said, you know, the cab is out there, he's tooting. One of us need to go out, so they told me to go out. Don't say anything because they're watching me. I went out and I got the grocery, and the guy got out of the car, and I said, no, you can stay there. And I put my hand up, just stay there. And as I'm walking back to my home, I happened to look up, and it was dark. We had this balcony that was on our home, and they were on the roof. I'm just standing there looking like, my God, what is going on? The cab driver left, but a car pulled up, and it was a red car. I'll never forget it. And it tooted. And I'm standing there saying, they're going to shoot me in the back of the head, and they're going to shoot me in the front. What did I do? What is going on? I just kept walking, going up the steps. I said, at any minute, I'm going to feel it in my back. At any minute, I'm going to feel it in my back. And that's all I was thinking. I wasn't thinking of anything else or nobody else. But I made it in the house. And I stood there. God, I was standing there shaking. I'm telling you, if I could just go back and just tell you how I felt wet. I was angry. I was sweating. Everything was happening to me that night. I just dropped the bags and just sat there. I looked up, and here come another person through the door. Family member. And these people call this person by their first name, and I'm sitting there looking confused, like, how do they know this person? They allowed this person to go in the room with the other person. I'm saying, why do you let this person go in there with them and not me? So I'm starting to put two and two together, like, what is going on? Y'all got a lot of stuff going on. But they went in there. That person came out and left. But we were still sitting there. My kids had to go to the bathroom. It was getting late. And they told me they couldn't go. I said, well, what are they going to possibly do? These are kids. The bathroom is at the top of the step. Just let them go. You got people on the roof already. Let them go to the bathroom. And I'm looking at them. You go together. Your sister go in that bathroom. You go in there with her. Your brother come out. You come out with him. Y'all come together no matter what you do. You come together. And they did just what I told them. There was another room we had up on the third floor, and I wish I could have gotten a message to them to go up there and hide in that room, but I didn't know whether they would be stopped going up. And it was a room in the attic part that I felt as though they could have hidden in, but I didn't know what would have happened. So they came back down, and they said, this time they was able to sit close to me. I saw the person go out, and then I saw the individuals coming out with the person that was in the room and my nephew. They arrested both of them. When I said arrested, these was police officers. They came into my house. Never did they say who they were. Dressed all in black. What was I to think? Your kid's on the floor, your mother's sitting in the chair, and you're thrown in the house and snatched. Shaking that whole night. My kids slept with me that night. As a matter of fact, they slept with me for a couple of nights. My mom went upstairs to her room. We really didn't talk about it that night. We didn't. The kids got up the next day and they went to school. I went to work. My husband went to work. I didn't know what to think. I did not know what to think. You know, I know my husband was furious. And he kept saying that we had to go. We had to leave. And I said, I can't leave my mother here. I cannot leave my mother here in this house like this. I don't know what's going on, but she got a phone call for the person that was arrested. And he told her, well, you could just imagine what he told her, that wasn't his fault. They had the wrong person. They had the right person. He knew exactly what he was doing. But he stayed in jail for a while. And we got back to normal. Well, we got back to something. I don't want to really say that it was normal because at this point, I didn't really know what normal was. And we continued to enjoy our life. We decided to get married there at the home. We fixed it up and did everything we needed to do. This person came home from jail, and they were there at my wedding. The morning of my wedding, I got a couple of phone calls. My food was canceled. My tent was canceled. My chairs was canceled. The tables was canceled. I was a mess. I was a complete mess. I didn't know what to do. So I called on my sister, who was my savior that night. She was my savior. She got her husband and a few of her friends, I believe, and they was able to cater the food. We started making phone calls, and we found a place that was able to get us the tent and the chairs and the tables, and we got it together just in time for the wedding. Walked right out of that house and we got married. We thought everything was over with. Okay, we went through all of that, but there was things that was about to happen again. Life happened again. I came home from work and I saw people, and we knew who they were this time. These were the police. They were digging in my yard saying they was looking for evidence. So I'm sitting there saying, my God, what now? They was digging through my yard. They was in my house. They was tearing up my house. They was all through. They was tearing up furniture and everything. They wouldn't tell me what they were looking for. They wouldn't tell me why they were there, except that they was looking for evidence. Threw open the windows, busted up a few things in the house. They just didn't care. They were worse than the fire department when they come in to tear up your house just to put out the fire to see if there's fire behind the walls. They tore up my yard. And when they left, they said they found what they came for. Now, I didn't see what it was, but they said that they found what they came for. And I'm just sitting there, just shaking my head like, what else could possibly happen? They made arrests. They made several arrests. I believe at that time they arrested 5 people. 2 of them was family members and 3 of them was not. And this case took us to another state. And the crazy thing about it, I had nothing to do with it, but I had to testify because I lived in that house and I knew 2 of the people. And that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. To sit there and take the stand against 2 people that you knew that was related to you. and just tell them everything you know. And I said, I don't really know anything. They asked me questions about growing up in the house and my relationship with this person, my relationship with that person. Well, because of their relationship, to me, it was just about equal, but one had a little bit more problem than the other. And I think they knew that because that person got immunity. He got immunity for the murder of somebody. Someone was murdered, and they said they found the evidence in my yard. How did that evidence get in my yard? When this person was murdered in another state. Calculated. This person was very calculated. They knew exactly what they was doing. They knew they had immunity, but they had to have enough evidence. So some went to jail. Some are still in there. And this was back in 2001. So when I moved to another state because of that, but I'm going to bring it back and forth, so just bear with me. We stayed there in that house for a little while longer. My mom moved, and it just left my husband, myself, and the kids. And it's not that I was happy that my mom moved, but she was safe. So we figured with nobody else in the house, we could do this. My husband and myself and the kids, and we could spread them out, and we could get the house back into the way that we thought it should be in, and he's working and I'm working, the kids is in school. The kids seemed to be a little happier at the time. But at the same time, something else was going on. I'm sitting in the park one day, and somebody walks up to me and said, my God, I thought you was dead. And I'm thinking that they're saying that because of all the activity that happened at my house. I thought maybe they got some information that there was some other doings at the house, that some people were killed or shot or whatever the case was. And I said, no, I'm sitting right here talking to you. And that's when I was told that they thought that I was dead because a hit was put out on me. That person that got immunity put a hit out on me and my husband and my kids, because I wouldn't allow them to sell drugs out of my mother's house. The house we grew up in, the house the neighborhood grew up in. How dare you? You already put mommy through enough. So I got home. I called my husband. And we got everything we can possibly get together. We packed up and we moved. Somebody's going to put a hit out on you. You can only hit a certain target. So we knew that we was targets, so we moved. And we moved to another state. And I cried for the first 6 months that I was there. I was so uncomfortable. I left everything behind. My job, people that I knew, the people I grew up with, my castle. My home was my castle, and I left that. As a wedding gift, my husband gave me another house. I left that behind. We left everything. I didn't want to trace. But how far could I have gotten? How far do I think I really could have gotten when this person would have known everywhere I was at? Because they were related to me. But I just needed to move from there. So I moved to the other state, and as I said, I cried for a while. Now, I won't say that we got settled there, but we found jobs, and we were working. But we couldn't stay in that house because the house that we were in, the landlord didn't tell us it was an abandoned house. So the state came by and told us that we had to move out because the landlord had some violations in there, and he cannot rent it to us, so it wasn't habitable for anybody to live. So we were homeless. We didn't have a place to live. We stayed with a relative, but when you don't have your own personal address, you're considered homeless. So we stayed with that relative for a little while, and there was 7 of us, my husband, myself, and 5 children at the time. And sometimes, you do without your welcome. So we left that place and we went to another relative's house. And as a matter of fact, it was the home that my mom was living in. And she only had a 3-bedroom, and there was still other people that was living there. We really couldn't stay there. And I know we were making people uncomfortable because that was their place. And it was 5 more people in there. And it was Thanksgiving time, so they allowed us to stay. But a couple of days later, I felt the pinch. I knew it was time to go. So I spoke to my husband, and that night we left. We went back to that house that we wasn't supposed to go into, but we had no other place to go. Our furniture was in there, the kids' things was in there. The house was set up. The neighbor that was next door said he would watch the house for us and tell the landlord fix everything. But we got in that house that night and we stayed. It was cold, drafty, and everything. But we stayed. Next morning, we got a knock on the door. It was the state. I said, here we go. They gave us a letter and told us to give it to the landlord. It was a citation. He said, we can't make you leave because you've been in this house for 24 hours. He knew we wasn't there for 24 hours, but I guess he felt sorry for us. We gave the letter to the landlord and he never did any repairs. So I took him to court. In the state that we were in, they put the money in escrow and told him to fix up the house. He didn't fix it. So we went back to court and they gave us the money that was in escrow and told us that we can move. So we moved into another neighborhood, a better neighborhood. It wasn't too far, but it's like when you go on the other side of the tracks, the world is different over there. Well, we went on the other side of the tracks and it just did seem different. We drove up and down in that community and was looking for a house. And we saw somebody making repairs outside of a home and it looked like it was empty. So we got out and we asked them if they didn't mind if we, was able to go around the back and look through the windows and everything. And they said, yeah. So we asked them, was the house for rent? They said, well, not this one, but this one over here. So we asked, could we walk around? And we did. So we asked for the information for the house and they gave it to us. And we spoke to the landlord and he said he would, well, he was the owner of the house. And he said he'll be there later on. So we waited about 2 hours because we know we needed to move. And he came in and he showed us the house and we filled out the application. And a couple of days later, he told us we had the house, that we can move in. And you talking about somebody was able to do a church dance. We were doing a church dance. We was able to move and we moved into that home. Kids went to a different school. I was working at a school. I was at a HBCU to get my bachelor's degree and my husband was working. So we were good. We stayed in that house for, I believe, 4 years. And we had some ups and downs, but we managed to get through it. We stayed in that house for 4 years. When I say we had some ups and downs, I mean me and my husband, we had some ups and downs. We didn't see eye to eye on plenty of things. And it was getting to be too much. I was working 2 jobs and going to school and trying to, manage the kids. But I think that he was finding his way around a little bit more than what I would have hoped for. So I asked him to leave. I said, you're not going to help me here. Why stay? You're not helping me. It seems like you're hurting me more than you're helping me. You go to work, you get paid, you come home whenever you want to. I don't live like that. I'm not built like that. I have to work and I have to manage my life. So he left without an argument. And he was going for a while, and I understand he was staying with a relative. And the relative told me, and I said, that's cool. I'm not upset that you opened your doors for him. I appreciate it. Maybe your husband can talk to him or whatever the case may be. But I have to do me and the kids. And I did for a long period of time. And he called me every once in a while, and there was times I just didn't feel like being bothered. In all honesty, I was still hurting. With all we've been through, this is what you're going to do. And I'm going to be the first to admit it. I'm not going to sit here and hide it. I told you we was going to get personal. My husband had a drinking problem. He was an alcoholic. And he thought that I could help him, but I couldn't. I could not help him at all. So we got into a lot of arguments over that and some other things, but he was where he was at. He would tell me he was in programs and he was doing well and whatnot. And we would meet up out in the community and it seemed like everything was okay, but the conversation, I knew that double talk. It was still best that he finished his program and just do what he needed to do. Sometimes he would call and we would get into little arguments over the phone. I don't have time for this. And I can hear that he was drinking. So I knew that I was done at that point. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. 5 kids, school, dealing with their schools. It was just too much. It was too much. So the call stopped for a little while, at least it did. And I remember he called me for my birthday. And I said, here we go again. Every birthday I have, you do the same thing. It's like it's your birthday, you're out celebrating. I don't get a chance to go celebrate my birthday because you're celebrating it in a condition that I just can't deal with. He called me to tell me that he was in the hospital. And I told him I couldn't come. For one, I didn't believe him because I've heard these stories before. So he asked for one of my sons to come up there. They were older by then. And I said, I don't want him coming up there to see you in this condition at all. Because I can hear it in your voice. You don't know anything. You don't know what you're talking about. Come on. We've been together for a very long time. And I knew an alcoholic when I saw one. I didn't go. I just couldn't do it. So he called me a few weeks later, told me he was in the program and he was doing well. And he said, I'm good on the phone. He asked if we could meet. And I said, okay, we'll meet. We were supposed to meet, but he never showed up. And I said, see, this is why I didn't want to come, because he's up to his old tricks. So I continued to work and go to school and do what I needed to do with the kids. And I got a phone call from a relative telling me that he never showed up at the house. He hasn't been there for a while. Do I know where he's at? I said, no, I don't. I haven't heard from him. He was supposed to meet me. But he just left, and I just don't know where he's at. So I decided to make some phone calls and see if I can find him and, just tell him that, from what she was telling me, that there was a check at the house for you. You need to go over there to get it and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Maybe you can get a place or whatever the case was. Called the hospitals, couldn't find him. Called places that I know that he frequent, couldn't find him. I took the phone upstairs and I went into my bathroom and I said, I'm going to make this one phone call. And then I'm done. I just can't keep calling. And when I did call, they said, yeah, he's here. That was the morgue. They told me my husband's body was in the morgue. And they said that he was dead for 3 weeks. I wasn't accepting it. I wasn't believing it. I went down, and they gave me the runaround. I ran from this hospital to that hospital to the morgue, everywhere. I was running back and forth. Oh, we can't do this. We can't do that. And then we got there to the morgue, and I asked, could I see the body? They told me to describe it. I said he had a tattoo here, and they went down there and they said, no, it wasn't a tattoo. What they saw, it wasn't where I said it was. So as I approached to leave, somebody else came up and said, ma'am, it is your husband. The tattoo is there. They cleaned up downstairs and they took me to a room and they spoke to me while they cleaned the area up and made it presentable for me to go in. And I walked to the back and they had a body laying on the table, and I got to the door. When I got to the door, all I had to do was look at the top of the head. And I knew it was him. So I walked around him and I looked at him. And he was laying there just as peaceful as could be. And I just thank God that he was peaceful, because I had to present him to his kids. So I went back to get his belongings from the hospital, and they told me that I couldn't get his belongings because of the HIPAA law. The man is dead. What HIPAA law is going to protect him now? I'm his wife. They gave me his belongings, and I checked everything, and I had them sign it, and I had to sign a receipt. And as I'm going through his things, I find my information in there, my son's medical card, my phone number. You mean to say that this hospital had a dead body in there and he didn't have any ID? He had ID. He had an MTA card with his picture on it and his name on it. And he's been to that hospital several times, and you didn't call me. So I went to the precinct. I found out that in the hospital, the doctor there didn't even want to sign off on him being dead. So they had to wait for somebody to come to identify him, to sign off to say that he was dead. And I believe it was somebody from the morgue or one of those places that they came and they signed off that he was dead. But you still could have made a phone call and told me. To this day, I still have his things. And this has been 16 years ago, and I have his sneakers, and they look like they were brand new. I have his pants, and the funny thing about his pants, it looked like his blood in the pants. Something wasn't right. His belt was cut. I had everything that was there still in the bag. I went around a different place. I went to the shelter that he had stayed in. They gave me the information, and they told me, we should have notified you because you're listed as next to kin in the event of an emergency. Tell me death is not an emergency, or because death is fine was no longer an emergency. I guess that's the way they did it. So we buried my husband. We buried him in a place that I wasn't too happy with, but I needed to bury him and just to put him at peace and to give my kids some closure. And I say my kids some closure because I don't think that I ever really had closure. But we tried. We tried to make it where we were at, but it wasn't working for us. So we decided to move. And while we were packing up to move and getting everything together, life happened again. We witnessed the murder. And we needed protection, so we went into hiding. They moved us. They brought us back to the house, and they told us that we can get a few things out. Excuse me. We went into the house, and something wasn't right. The back window was broken into. The thermostat, we saw it flickering. The police and everybody that was with us, we all were running out of the house because the house was ready to blow up because somebody had set that house ready to blow the minute we came in. We got out. People on the block said they thought we were shooting a movie. We had to leave everything behind. Second time, we're leaving everything behind. So we went to the location that they were at, and we stayed for a little while. And they told us they was going to move us again. I said, no. You're not going to move me again unless somebody in my family know where I'm at. I don't know you. I don't trust you. That's not how this works. I said, that's not how I work. So they brought two of my relatives there, and we was able to see them. And we was able to give them whatever information that we could, but they moved us anyway. And they moved us again, and they put us in this place. And they had us in a certain car, and we went to court, and we had to testify, and we was underground, and we came out. It was a mess. They told us that this case was elevating, and we would have to disappear altogether. We would have to change our names, our identity, and we would never see the rest of our family again. So my family had a celebration for my mother's birthday. And we went and we cried because we didn't think that we was going to see anybody again. So we went to court and we was waiting. And this person was served with a certain amount of years. And we were free. We were free to live a normal life, but what was normal? When you have to teach your kids how to play dead. When you have to make sure that your son learns how to drive and tell him to make sure the kids is in the car if anything happens and go to this location. Don't look back for me, keep going. When you have to make sure that bags are packed, water cases, you got cases of water in the car, you got one child making sure that the food is together, making sure the clothes is together, making sure you grab the kids. What was normal about that? Kids couldn't go to the same school that other kids was going to. I had to switch jobs and go into another community to work. It was rough. It was rough, but we managed. I had a child that graduated from kindergarten, one that graduated from 5th grade. My son graduated from high school, and I graduated with my bachelor's degree in social work. All in that 1 year. So we were able to do it because we had each other and we were together. I was able to muster up some money and work extra jobs and save and move out of that community with my kids intact. And that was so important to me. And I earned my master's degree. The kids went on to graduate from high school, so they're all just about grown now. So when I ask you, do your childhood affect your adulthood? There's this thing called ACEs, that's adverse childhood experiences. And that's exactly what I had and what I have. It's not a mental illness, it's just an experience that I had. And it's experiences that many of us have. And when I told you in the beginning that I was a perfectly imperfect life coach, parent coach, I'm not perfect. I have flaws. But I do coaching. I do parent coaching. And what I did was I parented myself. So I was able to get through that. And now I'm able to coach other parents to get through adverse childhood experiences. Now, I'm not going to go into much more, and I know some people will say, you need to write a book. Well, I did. It's called In My Mother's House. In My Mother's House. Now, I know I got some not so nice things said about it when I wrote it, but those are the experiences that I experienced in my mother's house. It's not about anybody else. It's just about what I went through. So it's in that book. And I'm not sitting here so you can go run out and buy the book. It's just that was therapy for me, to be able to put all that down. And the funny thing about that, I haven't even read the book. And I said, why should I read it when I lived the life? So I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me this moment to be able to share my journey. But my journey isn't over because there's other parts that I might share later on. Again, I thank you for joining me tonight. And I hope that you come back every first and third Friday of the month with me, your host of Basic Blaque After Dark. Like, share, and subscribe to The Crew podcast. Follow me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Still trying to learn how to use it. So you can catch me at any time. But we have some guests that's coming in, and we have some friends that drop by every once in a while. So I'm just hoping that you'll join us first and third Fridays of every month, okay? So I have a special guest coming up on March 3rd. So I'm hoping that you sit here and join us. Good night.